Can the term Chinese crap be considered racist or discriminatory when used in a corporate setting? We got to talk about this Reddit post because a lot of ABCs that work in product manufacturing are wondering this question. Long story short, this girl works in product manufacturing and she has a teammate on a project that constantly refers to Chinese crap. We don't want Chinese crap. And she said that she heard it so many times with a tone behind it that sounded racist, rude, or angry, even though it's like hard to describe exactly what it is. But basically, this guy who said it, who I believe was white, had some feeling behind those words. And basically, she just had enough of it one day being Chinese American and just said, hey, listen, guys, there's a Chinese person on these projects. Let's not make this an HR issue. So basically, she was debating in her head whether she overreacted, whether she was being too emotional. Did she do the right thing, wrong thing? And there were so many different responses. Anyway, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Check out Smile Out Sauce on Amazon.com right now. And basically, let's just get into the comments real quick. Somebody said, when I was a teenager and worked at a home goods store, I will never forget the woman to help me find her items made in America. None of that Chinese crap. It was Pier 1 imports. I believe that this person was Chinese themselves. This person said that I was in a meeting once with particular pricing strategy where a European guy kept saying, we don't want the Chinese menu. We don't want the Chinese menu. Another Chinese American woman in the room said, let's use another term for that. And then a more senior white executive followed up in an email saying that we should not use terms like that in a professional setting. And that was that. So basically people are confirming that this is quite common, particularly in product manufacturing, right? And there's reasons for this, and we're going to get into those. But also, it's key here that a European guy used it. In Europe, they may not have the same sensitivities that they have in America around race relations, right? Point number 2. Somebody said, the only people who will think you are out of line are non-Asians. Sadly, racism like this is seen normal even in some Asian spaces. Yes and no. I would say that the stereotype exists, but I don't know. I'd have to really see what it means like in an Asian space to see this happen. But I do agree that these stereotypes exist globally because these are from the 90s, 2000s. China did have a very cheap manufacturing archetype, stereotype and they still do make some cheap stuff there, or the cheapest functional stuff on earth is still made in China. But obviously they have moved a lot up market over the years. Point number 4, somebody said the people that use that term are so far removed from the process and means of production, it is easier for them to discriminate quality based on country of origin than make a far more accurate critique of companies making cheap products from exploited workers in places where labor can be found for cheaper with lower tolerances for specifications. This person's like sort of trying to explain it right here. I'll say this, like we said, it's true. China is the world's factory. There are people there who do highly skilled manufacturing work, whether you're saying that it's cheap, middle tier, or high tier, across all 3 tiers for cheaper than anywhere else on earth with a lower rejection rate. Now, you can say that those factory workers are being screwed and being treated like NPC robots in the meat grinder. There's even some people in China saying that. However, it is what it is, right? So basically, what I'm trying to say is like the stereotype does exist and it does come from somewhere, but how does that truth, first of all, where's the nuance in it? And second of all, how does it transfer over to the dehumanization of Chinese people in the West or the word Chinese, right? Point number 5, this guy saying, then, man, if, this guy knew a lot and he really is very tapped in with Chinese manufacturing, then it's not inherently racist. So you have to take the context into consideration. Yeah, yes and no. Like I said, it's a global stereotype, but it's not something that, you should use in a proper American HR setting, for sure. Point number 6, it's like covert racism. For example, in the movie Back to the Future, Doc scoffs when says, oh, no wonder made in Japan. Then Marty, coming from the future, reveres anything made in Japan. So it goes to show you that even in the Back to the Future, because Doc was like in the 1950s, they were like traveling through time, it goes to show you that at one point things even from Japan were considered really cheap and crummy, right? This is like when first Japanese cars first started coming in the early 80s, people were like, oh, those tin boxes that'll crumble versus like the ones where, American steel is way heavier. But then obviously people started to see how those Japanese cars never broke down and they were more fuel efficient. But it is true, Japanese cars have always, at least prior in the 1980s, they were made with like much less metal, which theoretically did make them crumble more. And I mean, like under very certain specific conditions, but more people were willing to take the trade-offs, right? Point number 7, this saying, it's a bit racist, but many even Chinese people don't like buying Chinese branded products themselves as it's seen to be cheaper and inferior in quality. They will actually pay a heavy premium in China to buy foreign products. Yeah, there is some truth to this, like we said. Somebody said, for people who are 35 and older, there was a time when Chinese imports did absolutely mean cheap crap. When China was setting up their manufacturing juggernaut, they were producing the cheap stuff and the knockoffs, and people are just really stuck in that mindset. Nowadays, obviously, there's still a lot of the low end is made in China, but middle end and now even some of the high end stuff is made in China. However, I will say, only recently has the high-end stuff been started to be designed in China. A lot of that high-end stuff, like the assembly of, for example, iPhones at a Foxconn factory or something, that's even like sometimes Apple outsourcing it to Taiwan, Taiwan outsourcing it to factories in mainland China. So it's actually like, once you really get into that, it's actually super complicated. Somebody said this sub is just looking for any reasons to claim racism. It's not actually racism. It's just describing where the product is from China and the quality of the product crap. You guys are trying so hard to make this racist. China objectively makes cheap quality things. When are we going to push the goalposts? This is ridiculous. Not everything is racist, holy-ish. Somebody said, you do understand the difference between a person of a race, ethnicity, culture, whatever, criticizing, basically out to stereotype all products made by a group of people as poor quality, and by extension implying that people of that group are incapable of making anything good. Ding, 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 ding. I think that is the most key comment right now. A lot of people say, oh, I'm just talking about Chinese manufacturing quality. Oh, I'm talking about the Chinese government. But at the end of the day, ultimately, for a lot of people, not everybody, they will not be able to separate the words from the people. And I do feel like people feel like, not everybody, obviously, if you're really like a nuanced thinker, a technical thinker, you see the pros and cons and you can weigh them out. I do think a lot of people think that Chinese people are incapable of making anything good and high end. Maybe not good and cheap, because obviously 80% of everything on Amazon is from China. But I'm saying that like the cool things, like, like that are high end, like a car or like a phone or like a music or like dramas or like things that are considered like very difficult to make. I believe that people think that China is incapable of producing those things. And I think the truth is, in the past, they really have struggled, but they're moving up the value chain very quickly. But yes, I totally see where the stereotypes comes from, because stereotypes, you could say, are earned more than they are just given, right? So anyway, guys, here's my quick thoughts on this. All right, so I'm not saying there's not some truth in the archetype that Chinese stuff is cheap, right? And it was for, a long time, but it's changing right now. So there's definitely a strong undertone of racism when people say it. So it's not that there's nothing truthful to the stereotype that Chinese things are quality, that are of low quality or knockoff or cheap, but it's just people don't care enough, or they have a vested interest in freezing in that mindset from several decades ago and not see the nuance in how things are so rapidly changing in 2024. Like we said, it's a global stereotype that China probably earned in the past. And it's like crazy to say now, but it's like there's a lot of nuance in it. First of all, I think this girl is right for not wanting to like have that thrown in her face every day. But it is true that it's like, man, it's like so complicated, because even the fakes now are like starting to get so good. Like if you look at some of the fake Rolexes coming out of China, or the fake Kobe 6s, it's almost like 9 out of 10 quality, 9.5 out of 10 AAA, quadruple A fakes. So it's at some point, it's like, if the functionality and like the durability is exactly the same, like what is a fake at some point? It's just not, you know what I mean? It is what it is. I think that's point number 3. It's good to speak up on it, but you can't let those words really echo throughout your brain all the time, because listen, it's already like this in 2024, and it's probably going to be this way for the next 5 to 10 years, if not more than that. So I think as Chinese Americans, we should speak up, but not be like tormented, like tapping ourselves in the head, like, everybody hates us, everybody hates our motherland, or like what it represents. It's a threat to the Anglosphere, and they're trying to do BRICS, and the BRICS is going to destabilize the US dollar and all this stuff, like, because it just is what it is. Like, it's completely outside of our realm of control, and also how people process it, right? But for example, once you understand stuff like, the mid to high-end Chinese EVs, a lot of them do look like the Porsche EVs, to be honest. Like, I think they've taken heavy design inspiration, but they're also great cars generally from, if you read the actual reviews of the Chinese EVs, they do, I'm not lying, they do knock off Porsche like whether it's the Porsche Cayenne EVs or the Porsche whatever EVs or the Ferrari EVs, they do knock them off like more than they technically probably should. It is like for good manners, but it's like they also are good. See, now you're starting to understand the nuance in this like fake bootleg culture, but it's just like inspiration. And then also that inspiration, where is that going to lead? Because, you know, all great art starts with mimicry, and then, you know, it just takes time to build up the muscles and go this way and that way. So it's like I said, it's not that there's nothing to it, but it just takes time. Anyway, you know, I mean, like, I don't know, does the new Hyundai Santa Fe look a lot like a Range Rover, the EV one? Yeah, it does. I don't know. And somebody says, also, once you start to understand where China came from and where it's going, and also how people in the West, in the Anglosphere, like that are more bought into Anglo dominance or Anglosphere dominance, it's like people feel threatened right now, so they want to emotionally throw like extra weight behind their words. And just the fact that it is a real stereotype that came from somewhere, they're just going to like throw extra oomph behind it. And you know, that's just what it is. Like, it's going to be that way. I do think if China's rise was a little bit like viewed as like cooler and smoother with more soft power, it definitely have less wrinkles than where does it stand now. You know what I mean? Where basically they were just focusing on doing the hardware work and the hard soft power work. And I mean, hard power work. And they basically neglected soft power. So when you don't have a lot of soft power, but you're coming up in hard power, it's a little bit like how people viewed USSR or like, you know what I mean? When its rise, it was like, it's like an uncool takeover. Whereas people tend to be a little bit more acceptance of like cool takeovers, like when America overtook England, and then England obviously before that overtook the Dutch for the world order. Like it came with a lot of soft power at the same time, and English capacities and things like that. So movies and stuff like that. But it's just the Chinese one, it was more of like a manufacturing, like economic, like trade surplus thing. So it's just really hard to understand. And then I just think that lastly, it's like Chinese, man, we almost have to be like the most detached technical people on earth. And it's so crazy to say that because I know a lot of people already stereotype us as like hyper calculative, like non-emotional, like some people say we're robotic or NPCs, but it's almost like, because I just thought about this issue so much, and it's almost like you're just gonna have to accept that everybody, including other Asians, sometimes you're gonna hear it, you know, in a talk down way from the Japanese and the Koreans sometimes, or like you're gonna hear it in a more like you're being mean to us, pushing us around, taking us over as the evil empire way from a lot of Southeast Asians. And I totally see where people are coming from, right? Japan and Korea, they feel like superior. Southeast Asia, they feel like bullied. And it's like, it just is what it is, man, because everybody has their own perspective and they're interested in like how their lens is seeing it. And you're just going to hear it from everywhere, but you're going to hear love and stuff from everybody too. So it's just, man, I just think that for Chinese, it's so easy if you think a lot about how other people feel about you, it's so easy to give in to the fact that we're meant to like feel bad for being Chinese, or like China's rise is coming with so many clunky, sometimes ugly things, you know, that are definitely not smooth. And I wish weren't that way. But at the same time, it's almost like, man, listen, once you sort of realize things, you kind of get to this point to you're like, man, it is what it is. This is such a fascinating life and such a multi-layered life to live as like a Chinese American. If you really embrace both of those identities, simultaneously being American and being Chinese and knowing like what all goes into it. Anyway, here's just, I just, you know, got some other takeaways beyond my own real quick. Tone does matter, not just the actual words themselves. For example, I remember growing up, sometimes you'd be like, you know, that Asian kid over there. All he's doing is technically calling you Asian, but there's so much negative feeling behind that word that it is unacceptable. Because even if you call somebody like their ethnicity, but with the tone and the cadence behind it and the feeling and the emotion, of course it impacts and completely like colors the connotation, right? Point number 2, your experience producing anything in China is going to be highly variable, right? Like a lot of people were saying in the comment section, you get what you pay for, or like maybe certain Chinese factories when left to their own devices without specifications. Definitely, like I said, you got to do your due diligence when you're producing stuff in China, because it's true. Sometimes you know, people are going to upcharge you or you know what I mean? I'm sorry, not upcharge you, but like maybe skimp on the quality to get more margin or something like that. But obviously, there's a lot of people producing really high quality stuff in China too. So it's highly, highly variable. And this is a 2024 thing. Of course, everybody's saying that thinks everything made in China is like Temu or Shein, right? Nobody wants a car from Temu or Shein, right? Because a car, you rely on it. It potentially could be fatal if you pick the wrong car. So, and then there was a lot of Chinese cheap EVs that were sub 10K, sub 15K that did catch on fire in some, second or third tier cities. So like I said, I'm not saying that that stuff's not true, but I'm just saying that it's just not the whole truth. And yeah, that's just where we're at right now, right? Point number 3, China makes so much high-end, ultra high-tech stuff right now, and it's not just the knockoff version of Japanese things. For example, Miniso. Miniso, it is knockoff in the sense that, like they said they had a Japanese founder, but they don't, but they kind of brand it like a little bit nicer version of a Daiso, but the company Miniso is from Shenzhen. It's true because they knew that like Shenzhen branding, nobody's gonna want to call it from like Mini SH, like Mini Shenzhen, because it's just, that wouldn't work on a global basis, right? And I just think that China does have a lot of solar panels now, AI tech, battery tech, drones, EVs, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I just think that if you look at, I'm filming this on a DJI Osmo Pocket 3 right now, and it's like finally to the level where it's like most people's best, travel vlogging camera. So like I said, man, there's truth to this old stereotype, but it's changing. But if you hate a group of people or you feel some type of way towards them, you're not gonna lend them the nuance of updating your firmware pack or your stereotype archetype pack of that group of people. Point number 4, there was a lot of comments saying it's a government psyop that people are falling for. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about that $1.6 billion budget that the US government has to turn people against Chinese goods or just Chinese anything, and that will lead to more people talking trash about it, you know what I mean? And it's like, it is what it is, man. But it's just like I said before, in my own hot takes, it's like other groups will not necessarily need to have this level of like self-identity reflection because it'll just either be an unknown group. Like a lot of Southeast Asian groups, to be honest, to America are just like completely unknown in terms of what their motherland is producing or not producing. And then like Japanese and Koreans generally, I do think they're very sensitive about their image, but at the same time, they can be because probably most of the things that people are gonna say 70 to 90% are positive, right? Maybe outside of like patriarchal things or whatever, like pressurized society or something like that. So anyway, point number 5, stereotypes are earned to some extent, but like I said, it really comes down to like how much you like something. Have you ever seen how many red flags that a guy will overlook for a girl that he thinks is gorgeous? And I'm just talking about most guys. Obviously not everybody does this, but like guys will overlook so many red flags that are kicking them in the face for this like gorgeous girl that they want to be with. And for a girl that they don't want to be with, maybe that their parents are trying to set them up with, and it's not like, the look that they want or the vibe, the archetype that they're looking for, they'll like pick apart anybody. And girls do this to guys do this to girls as well, And it just goes to show you that that's like sort of the winds that sort of like color these narratives that flow this way or that way. For example, the term going Dutch was considered negative in England. If you guys know about world empires, it was the Dutch and then like kind of the Portuguese, and then it was the British, and then the Americans took it from the British, and potentially, especially if you look at the splits of Ray Dalio, the Chinese are going to take it from the Americans, okay? So at the time when the English were going to war with the Dutch, they came up with all these terms such as Dutch wife, Dutch courage, Dutch comfort, Dutch gold, going Dutch, that had negative connotations because you wanted to vilify the group that you were going to war with in this constant like power struggle with. So that's basically what's happening to China right now. But like we said, there's some truth to it, but obviously I thought it was good on this Chinese American girl to call it out, but I would also encourage her to really look into it and be like, arrive at a place where it almost like doesn't really bother you, because we're living in the Anglosphere. So it's almost like inevitable, because if you really understand this, like these tensions between like the next world superpowers, it's almost like inevitable to happen from the older generations. But it's good to call it out, but not obviously get overly emotional for your own mental health. But obviously, depending on how comfortable the company wants to take it. But I think let's use another term for that, or like, hey, let's switch up the vocabulary of how we describe things, guys. I happen to be Chinese American myself. I'm not comfortable with this. I think that that is a perfect zone to be in, where you're being firm, you're being real, but at the same time, maybe you are not, causing the whole system to go frantic or haywire that you're in right now over something that, now hopefully you just understand where we're at, but still stop it where you can. So anyway, guys, long story short, it is racist, and it does, especially depending on the tone and the feeling, but it is what it is, man. So like I said, it's something that there's so many ways to look at life. There's a moralistic way to look at life, and then there's also more just this functional aspect of needing to get on with your day. I think it's just even more important, like, to go represent and change Chinese stereotypes and let people know that you're proud of being Chinese, as it is to stop the negative aspects. Stopping the negative microaggression comments, important, but even more important to go rep. That's how I generally feel about it. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm sure there will be some arguing. Some people will say, well, the stereotypes are well-deserved and they're earned and they're not given. And other people will say, oh my gosh, I hate this. This is so disgusting. The truth is, guys, life is very complicated. Life is very layered. That's my take. I don't care. You guys say it's too down the middle, whatever you want to say, because I could see it from a lot of different sides, but I think it's even more important to represent. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time, we're the Hop Hop Boys. We out. Peace.